All right, welcome back to yet another episode. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We put the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guest, she's returning alumnus of the show,
Right.
alumnus. I don't know if that's gendered or not, but she's been on the show before. We'll link that episode too. But it's been almost
About
300
a
episodes
year.
ago. So
Yeah.
it's been about a year. It feels like it's been forever. It's been too long, clearly. But can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jennsen. I am a recovering lawyer turned recovering software developer turned very relieved full-time science fiction writer. I write space opera and epic adventure science fiction with healthy dashes of all of the other subgenres: military sci-fi, cyberpunk, thriller, singularity themes. They're all set in my Amaranth universe. I published my first book, Starshine, in 2014, and my 20th novel, Medusa Falling, basically right now. In my spare time, I'm a geek and a tech nerd and an avid video gamer and an optimistic futurist. And as of 2 years ago, my husband and I and our two furry little children live in the wilds of Northwest Montana.
Nice, nice. So this is something we didn't release last time because she's got real privacy concerns, dear listener. But I'm gonna blow this one out of the water for you. What you don't know is the GS, the of her initials. Her mother had so much faith in her writing abilities, even in utero, that it stands for great sci-fi. You didn't know that, but that's actually what the GS stands for. I mean, it's probably hard growing up with that as your name. So I get why you go by initials, but I mean,
You
you
know,
gotta
I
love your mom for having that much faith.
absolutely, I often have people ask me what the initials stand for, especially at conventions and that type of thing. I'm going to use that from now on. Thank you.
Your mother had a lot of faith. I'm just, we're very proud of her because you proved her right. She's like, all those extra English lessons, they were totally worth it. So the next part of the introduction, dear listeners, where I first found them. So I was riding along, minding my own business, casually cruising by the rings of Saturn, as you do, when I accidentally crashed in the back of her Star Destroyer. Oops. I mean, luckily insurance covered the damages, but she's definitely going to need a new Death Star. So we're sorry about that. Look, I mean, who knew you'd hit it in the one spot where everything just would go kaplooey? How's the rebuild coming? Are you getting close to the completion of the replacement yet?
Oh, it's funny. My main character in most of my books has her own starship. She built her own starship. It is her pride, her joy, her child. She is as possessive of that starship as anyone could ever be for anything. And its name is the Sion. And if you were to actually crash into the back of that, the wrath that you would meet from her would be absolutely unparalleled. I can't even tell you. So this is a pretty tricky origin story here for you.
So when you say she built it by hand, how big are we talking? Because I'm thinking ship builds. I mean, we've got whole shipyards to build one standard size, warship. So are we talking like pleasure cruise kind?
Yeah,
Talking Titanic
this is a
size?
personal craft. She starts off as a space scout and explorer. She gets hired by corporations, to go find valuable asteroids, valuable planets, other type of crazy things that are out in space that can make them a lot of money. And since, especially in my early days, though still now also, but for the first book and the first trilogy, I did an excessive amount of world building planning. Let me just tell you, we have a little over 100 worlds that have been colonized when the whole series starts, and I gave every single one of them names. I say all of that to tell you that I know the exact dimensions of the ship, and it is 45 feet long by 25 feet wide, and it has three levels. So I think that was about 25 or 30 feet tall as well.
That is a very cramped ship.
Well,
it's picturing living in that.
It's just hard to start off with. So
you couldn't have given her like the Millennium Falcon size, because at least they had some room to move.
No,
I don't know. But I mean, I guess if you're building it yourself.
Yeah, she got everything she wanted on it. And, it's mostly scientific instruments and that type of thing. Um, and it's a very comfortable living space. You've got the cockpit, you've got a couch and a lounge and a little kitchen area on the main floor, and then she's got a bedroom down below, and then down below that is the engineering well where she accesses all of the components and instruments and all of that kind of stuff. So she's happy with it.
So you say it's mostly scientific instruments in the beginning. Would a plasma rifle, or I guess plasma cannon, count as science? Because there's science involved in the making of the energy and plasma that you're shooting at things. So that's science,
true.
right?
Well, and in her asteroid work, sometimes you got to shoot up the asteroids to, find out what's in them. But I said in the beginning, because as the story develops, she definitely adds some guns. We'll just put it that way.
For science, of course.
Well, no, not actually for science any longer, just for shooting things.
Okay. I mean, I'm just saying you can shoot things for science and just call it good.
Can,
I was doing research.
Absolutely has. But she does need to upgrade the firepower whenever things get serious.
So you mentioned all the world building you did. So what are they doing for food? Because that's a relatively compact ship. So unless she's constantly resupplying, you're not storing a whole lot of long-term food. So does she have some sort of like replicator making food a la Star Trek, or a lot of freeze-dried meals? What was the planning?
Well, she does resupply frequently. Like I say, she goes on these little missions, specified targets and that type of thing. And we have a lot of colonized worlds. So there's a lot of places to stop off. In my world, people still like to cook when they can. Obviously, 300 years from now, we can make artificial food. We do make artificial food and that type of thing. But I always felt like it's kind of a very human thing. If any chefs or any people who just really love cooking, then it is so important to them. And it's about so much more than, the specific ingredients of the recipes or that type of thing. My cousin loves to cook, and she says feeding people makes her happy. The act of making the food to feed the people makes her happy. It's a big part of her life. And so I think people who do enjoy it, even way in the future when they don't have to, they're still going to cook for the enjoyment of it, and probably tell themselves that nothing else tastes like the real thing. So for her, it's a combination of that. Of course, there's the freeze-dried foods and that type of thing. Funny, confession here straight off of a weakness or whatever, because someone actually brought this up to me recently. I didn't think about 3D printing food whenever I did all of this world building. Will we be able to do that 300 years from now? Will we have replicators a la Star Trek? Absolutely. Of course we would. It did not occur to me. I completely blanked on it. And that was bad of me. I definitely included that. That's a blind spot. It's something that as a sci-fi author, you always worry about, the blind spots. I like to tell the story about Neuromancer, one of the greatest science fiction books ever written. William Gibson predicted the internet and hard drives and artificial intelligence, most of all. He failed to conceive of any type of cellular phone technology. The characters in Neuromancer talk to each other on payphones. And if there's one thing that keeps me up at night as a science fiction writer, it is, what are the payphones in my books that I didn't see, that I wasn't clever enough to conceive of. And one of the payphones in my early books is that there's really no replicators, that there's no food replication or that type of thing.
See, the great thing about science fiction in the print form is all you have to do is release a prequel to the prequel, where you can write, well, this is why we don't have it, and it's outlawed because this act, because insert whatever reason you want, and you can explain it away. Because as long as you can explain why you did something, then it's not wrong. It's just different world, right?
Absolutely.
So I don't know. There was the great rebellion against 3D printed food because everyone was convinced it would steal your soul. I mean, I can imagine when, and they cover this some in Star Trek, when you first start getting the teleportation, for instance, because it breaks you down molecularly and then reassembles you on the other side. Are you when you come out on the other side, or is it another version of you? And those kinds of things are already happening when they're talking about lab-grown meat. So I don't know, as long as you make there's a reason for it, that it's even wrong that you didn't have it in this story.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not eating that lab-grown stuff. You know,
Not
for all I know,
anytime
50
soon.
years from now, you're going to find out it gave you cancer or something, right? So, like, I get.
Yeah, Soylent
I mean,
Green
you could
was a
find a reason.
cautionary. Yeah, Soylent Green was a cautionary tale, not a how-to guide. So
Someone forgot to tell our tech billionaires who want us, like, I think Zuckerberg and Musk are trying to get people on the lab grown stuff.
yeah,
He's one of them. I just
Zuckerberg, I think
remember, or
in
maybe it was
particular, or Bill.
Bezos.
Yeah, Bill Gates, maybe. Yeah,
I think it was, yeah, maybe. But there was one of the rich people trying to tell us how to live our lives. And I don't hate rich people. I want to be rich people. So this isn't me throwing shade, but they were like, oh, lab grown meat's the future. I don't know. There's nothing like charring your meat over a grill,
exactly,
on a hot summer
exactly.
day.
It's a cultural experience as much as it is just nourishment.
I think some of it is also almost, I don't know if I buy in totally to the idea of genetic memory, but I mean, there's something I think there that ties back to our primitive nature, like the Neanderthal brain that's inside of every one of us. Like, I think there's something about like doing it yourself. Like, I can tell you, food tastes better when I grew the vegetables myself. I've made a few soups where everything but the chicken came out of my garden, and I
No,
don't know, maybe it's psychosomatic, but I thought it tasted better. So, I mean,
well,
I think there's
I
something
will.
to that.
Yeah, I'll have to take your word for that. Whenever we moved to Montana, the property that we bought has a garden on it, and embracing all of this more wilderness life, like we're going to be gardeners. We are going to grow not all of our own food, of course, but we're going to grow our own vegetables. We are absolutely going to do this. It was such an abject failure. We are a total failure as gardeners. So I'm not sure that I will get to ever have the experience that you did of that. And that's a shame.
Well, I've only had 1 year where the garden of the last 5 I've been gardening. I jokingly call it my victory garden. Of the one tying back to World War II, not my actual skills of completion of the gardening, but I've often joked that I have a black thumb. But I had 1 year where the carrots just took and the potatoes took, and probably in spite of me, not because of me, and I managed to get just enough for one soup, and that was it. But I have my property is very, very tiny. It's what they call postage lot. So I grow everything in buckets for now. At some point in time, I'll sell enough books and I'll buy the homestead. But I got to come up with a really cool name for it, because if you're going to have a homestead, you got to give it a cool name. Did
Yes.
you name your property? Tell me it
yes.
was something cool.
Okay. So in my books at book 11, or after book 9 anyway, the two main characters, so along the way, book 4 and then again sprinkled throughout, they encounter a sentient planet, and there's a whole backstory of that and everything, but they encounter this sentient planet, and one of the main characters bonds with the sentient planet. And so at the end of the big finale of the first 9 books, they move to that planet and build a house. And the name that they gave the planet was Akiso, which is a Greek word. And so actually, whenever we moved here, we got a frilly, a metal plaque made that says Akiso, and that is beside our front door. So
nice. What does it mean?
I moved to the place where my main characters live. What can I say?
Nice. What does Akiso mean?
It means sort of everlasting life.
Okay.
All life, yes.
Okay. I like it. Now, if the planet is sentient, does that mean it feels pain?
Yes, it can.
So does that mean it hurts when they're cutting down the trees on it to build the house and to, dig the foundation? Like, was that painful for the planet?
Yeah, well, and they actually do take care to do as little of that as possible. But no, it understands the cycle of life, life, death, rebirth. It's all about growing new things and that type of thing. It has storms because it is a planet with a whole ecosystem. So storms happen and lightning strikes trees and they break apart and that type of thing. So that's really just part of its life.
Okay. Do you cover the origin story for that sentient planet? It just fascinates me.
I do. Yes. You're
telling me I'm going to have to read 9 books to figure it out? Fire home 9 today.
When is that actually finally revealed? Well, whenever they discover it, they know something about how it came to be, but the full story of that does not actually happen until, I believe, book 17. So,
ooh, it's a commitment, but I want answers, so we'll have to dive in.
But it matters because how it actually came to be is obviously related to an important subplot that is going on in the story at that time.
So have you ever seen Stargate Atlantis?
Yes.
Do you remember the hive ships that the Wraith use?
I do.
They were actually living ships that sort of grew biological. And ever since I watched that when it first came out in the early 2000s, I think, I remember the whole concept of a sentient ship fascinated me.
Yes.
Now, Andromeda, the series that had the guy that was in Hercules in it, I can't remember the actor's name, but he was in the Andromeda TV series. His ship was sentient, but it was because the AI that controlled it was sentient more than the whole ship itself. But the idea of like non-traditional things that are alive, like ships and now planets, that's kind of neat idea to play with.
Yes, I am fascinated by it as well. And I do several different things with that over the course of the books.
I guess the fantasy equivalent would be the continents that are on the backs of like, was it turtles or whatever? You've seen some of the old fantastical art. I guess that's like the fantasy equivalent.
Terry, I'm drawing a total blank, and I even have stuff related to that. But yes, that was a whole series about that.
Okay, well, there's a lot of Terrys that write sci-fi.
Fantasy has swords that are alive, that have their own personalities and that type of thing.
So speaking of being alive, we're going to ask you the religion question, because that part, while we're a little more free-flowing than we used to be, will never change. So are you ready for this? I'm going to ask you a different one than you got last time.
Okay.
Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly? You get the classics.
And I am going to totally cheat and have an answer for all three of them. I want the world of Star Trek. And in my books, the world is one of relative abundance and most humans trying to be their best selves. So, I grew up on Star Trek. I was probably inspired by that. And so I would love for our future to be the world of Star Trek. But of course, Star Trek can be a little boring, maybe not when you're on the Enterprise, but for the average ordinary people living on Earth and elsewhere, it can be a bit dull. Star Wars is exciting. It's wild. It's expansive. You got all these different kinds of crazy aliens. It is alive. And that is awesome. I don't want Firefly's world. I mean, that was pretty tough from a lot of respects. But from a storytelling perspective, Firefly is probably the most compelling one of the three. The characters and the world that it brought to life and everything like that. But I'm not sure that I would want to live in that world.
It's also because they can never take the sky from me. That's why we want to own the sky.
I
know it's a little cheesy.
Okay, I have a bumper sticker on my car that says shiny. And it's in the font that they used in the series. So obviously I love Firefly.
I just wish they had done more with that universe. They had so much depth that even does. From the problem is if you want to go, if you go back and you just redo it, I mean, you're never going to get it quite. Like, you're never going to have another Mal Cooper. No, not Mal Cooper. That's an author we know. The captain, Mal. What was his last name?
His name was Mal, though. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Mal. The other Mal that I've met actually in person, she can just giggle when she hears this. But you're not going to get the Nathan Fillion?
Nathan Fillion, yeah.
The actor. Like, if you try to redo it, it's not going to have that same character that he brought to it, so it's going to feel cheap. If you take it X number of years into the future and make a sequel that's like just a time skip to wherever wherever the characters are now, I'm not sure all of the actors from that are still alive. Which would get in the way. You could tell stories in that universe, but without the ship, is it still the same universe? I mean, just like Star Trek, can it be Star Trek without the Enterprise?
Yeah, it was the characters. and their interactions that really made the show, and that means it was the actors. So no, I know Hollywood is reboot insane right now, but I really hope they don't do that.
I think they're out of ideas. They just need to, okay. There's that old joke, sobriety killed rock and roll. I think getting rid of the Coke killed Hollywood, because those writing studios have just never been the same since all that nose candy from the 80s.
Yeah.
Not that I'm encouraging drug use, people. I'm being facetious, but like I think it's twofold. One, reboots they feel like they're safe. When you use a property that you already created, you don't have to pay the authors or the creators as much, because they're just building and existing. So the royalty shares are in their favor if it's a big hit. So like if you write another Marvel and you bring in a brand new character that's a runaway hit and they make trillions off the merchandising, they have to give you a part. They don't want to share that. So, we're just going to tell the 12th version of Superman, and it's going to be totally different but the same. So I don't know. You're right. They would ruin it probably if they brought it back. I think you could get away with Show the War where the Browncoats lost. That could be, or you could just do it in fiction. Get them doing the graphic novels or the novelizations.
Yeah, I mean, because the story did continue in graphic novel form.
Did it now?
So, yes. So the story is there to be told. Obviously, the actors are a good bit older. All of the stars would have to align, and that's pretty hard to do in Hollywood these days.
So I've been burned once by series that were dropped. They never continued, and they're like, "Oh, read the graphic novel. We give you the ending." And then the graphic novel was a cliffhanger too, and I'm like, "You sons of biscuit eaters!" I did the Stargate Universe. I got hooked. I was one of probably 12 people that liked that series, the TV series.
Yeah, I liked
it.
Well,
the story continues, and the story continues. Well, it's the least favorite because it was a different formula. So
sure. Oh yeah,
Stargate Universe,
SP1. With it. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked the grittiness. I liked the realism that they actually like, hey, we don't know when we're going to resupply. Let's strip this body of all the crap we're leaving behind, right? Instead of just, leaving, one more P90 on the floor. But the graphic novel ended on a cliffhanger too. And I'm like, you promised me an ending.
And then it didn't do either, huh? Yikes.
No, so I'm a little leery because graphic novels are a huge fiscal investment because they're not cheap when you buy them. So I might have to preview before I buy and see if they actually conclude the story. Did you buy it or read it?
No, I didn't realize that the story continued in graphic novel form. I enjoyed the series. I wouldn't say that I loved the series enough to go and dive into the larger world of it.
They didn't. Well, in all those cases, it's Fox is where good shows go to die. Fox Entertainment.
Yeah.
This is, most people don't realize it. This is the younger listeners. This was the land before binge watching everything on Netflix, where your DVR recorded it. But what people didn't realize, and I've said this before, so I won't belabor the point, it didn't actually record inner show you want to watch. It recorded a time slot. So if the news event, if a football game ran later, any of those things pushed it, the slot still started recording at 9 p.m. on Friday, whether the show had started or not. So there are times you might only get the first half hour. And then on top of that, they didn't count those recordings as watches. So when they were tracking the metadata to say how many people are watching this to make decisions to continue it or not, none of those viewers counted in the age where DVRing was king. And so they probably didn't even get credit for half of it. And then I don't know if you know this, Fox aired Firefly out of order.
Yes, I did know that. It's one of the many sins that all of the fans will pull out their book of grievances about what happened to Firefly, and that is definitely pretty high on the list there. I have no idea what they were thinking.
My grievance isn't just on Firefly. I have a list of grievances against Fox Entertainment because, Terra Nova was canceled by them too, and that was just criminal. Every boy likes dinosaurs. Sorry, just a fact of biology. And that was a show with nothing but dinosaurs, and they canceled it. How rude. I'm still bitter.
I can tell.
Okay, so did you did you let any of that love of Firefly inspire the world building you did with the Amaranth universe? Am I getting that right? I know it starts with
Amaranth,
an A.
Yeah.
I just can't pronounce it.
Absolutely. Okay. Not Firefly specifically. I would say my books tend to be a bit more optimistic, envisioning a slightly better world. I mean, the characters run into tons of problems, obviously. Yeah, there are difficulties, there are challenges, there are bad guys. There are lots of people that are not good at all. But the core of the theme of the book is, say, daring to imagine that humanity will prove to be better than we believe ourselves to be. And so, Fireflies, I'm not sure that I would call it dystopian exactly, but, like I said, the world that it's in is pretty tough, and the characters are, they are scraping by. It is a ragtag group, trying to get one more job to, get the money to eat and that type of thing. And that makes for a great, compelling story to watch and to read in many cases and that type of thing. But that's not really the way that I write personally.
I don't mind grittiness, but I can't do grimdark because I need to know, one, I like the classic good versus evil trope that gives us something aspirational. I like knowing that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't always have to end every book on oh my God, the world is sunny and perfect now, because then what do you come back to? But I like knowing that the arc of the series is at some point something good comes of it and you get sort of a satisfactory ending. I don't like the George R. R. Martin approach of oh, you like this guy? Let me kill them. And not to say that characters don't die. I write it that way. I read it that way. But if they die, you don't want the wash ending where it was like, okay, just random happenstance and they die. Like if you're gonna make a character die, make it mean something. I mean, you got secondary characters in the infamous red shirts for the random death. If you're gonna get someone invested in a main character or even a main secondary character, and you're gonna kill them, make it mean something. Like to me, just personal preference. Because I'm not going to yuck someone else's yum. So if you love grimdark, more power to you. We'll shop in different aisles. When it comes to book buying, right? Like, I've seen enough of the dark side of real life. I want better in my fiction.
Yes, exactly. People read fiction to escape. To find a better world, especially, if people are having trouble in their life and that type of thing, then books provide the escape for, adventures and excitement and a better world than what they're experiencing right now. That's one of the one of the beauties of books.
So you liked Firefly and you liked Star Wars, and both of those are basically spaghetti westerns in space. So as a kid, were you a fan of the westerns? The Louis L'Amour and Clint Eastwood and all those that made the westerns back in the day, John Wayne?
Not really. My father was a big fan of westerns, and so perhaps I was just rebelling against him, but because I did do that in a couple of ways and a couple of things that were important to him. So no, I would not say in particular. I did have to watch many of them thanks to him, but I would have preferred to have been, watching Star Trek and Buck Rogers and that type of thing.
At least you had good taste. So we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades. So Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or Lord of the Rings?
Lord of the Rings, absolutely. I was an early reader of Game of Thrones. Back, I think we picked them up about the time that book 3 came out, which was about last century. Well, not even last century, 2 centuries ago. It was 100 years ago, right? Because obviously he is infamous for taking 3 lifetimes to write a book. But picked up, enjoyed the first 3, even as dark as they were. But obviously they got progressively darker and more characters, progressively died as you went. And the stretch between the books just got absurd. And, I watched the show, obviously, whenever it came on and that type of thing. And there was a lot of good things about it. But at the end of the day, I am not a fan of the pointless deaths, the torture of characters, both literal torture, and emotional and circumstantial torture and that type of thing, just to be cruel. So while I initially enjoyed the first couple of books, my opinion is certainly soured on that a lot. The Wheel of Time is great. I enjoyed the first season of the TV show on Amazon. I thought they did a really good job. I'm looking forward for season 2. But absolutely Lord of the Rings, the books, the movies, they're books about hope. I mean, again, the characters, they struggle, they have enormous hardships, and the strength that they have to find, to persevere and to rise up again and again and again, it's ultimately rewarded. And I think that is a much better story to tell, more powerful and more compelling.
I think it helps that J.R.R. Tolkien is aspirational in his own right. I don't necessarily. His biography is on my list of things I want to read, in the near future. Go get that from the library. In fact, I'm on the waiting list. But just knowing what I know of World War I history, and that he was at the Somme in the beginning, on the first battle, where I think it was like something like 50,000 men, and I probably underestimating it. It's a whole crap ton of men died in the first day of that battle, and he was there to witness it. I get why he escaped to fiction. I get why he wanted hope, a light at the end of the tunnel. I understand, having seen just a fraction of that in the early war in Iraq. I understand why he wanted, modern day Beowulf, essentially, where it was a hope at the end of the darkness.
Exactly. And how inspiring is that he saw some of the worst things that any human being can see, can experience. And yet after that, he chose to write a story of hope and redemption and all of that. Yeah. That's really, really compelling.
I took writing as therapy class, the VA offer. They don't offer it anymore, sadly. The lady that taught it, I think she was a professor at William & Mary, but I don't remember what school it was. We've got so many colleges in the Hampton Roads area that I don't remember which of the universities she came from, but she was a local professor. Unfortunately, she was a Navy wife. Well, fortunately for him, I'm sure. So when he got stationed, she moved, and then the class no professor took it up. But they did a writing as therapy class, and that was her first day of that session. As a group therapy thing, was her dropping all of the Lord of the Rings, so the three main and the Hobbit, all on the table, and she's like, "If he can do it, so can you." And then she started showing pictures of the Somme from the first day of the battle, those black and whites, and she's like, "So nothing you've seen compares. So suck it up." And that was how she started the class.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of resonates, like when you even just a little bit about World War I. And that's what you're comparing, using this as therapy against. It's like, I guess what I saw didn't look so bad. That what's that? You don't want to ever be the gunfighter because someone's always going to be quicker. Paraphrasing John Wayne on that one, so for that therapy class, and I've always sort of kept that in the back of my mind when I write, that that the hope is the end goal, because you've already seen the other side of that. So you want something, you want to leave a legacy that's positive, right? Because if you write, like, every time your book is in print, you're immortal now, right? I mean, I'm not trying to offend anyone's religious sensibilities, but we still talk about Beowulf, and how old is that story, right? We still talk about Tolkien, and he's been dead for 100 years? I don't know when he died, but it's been a while, right? Those people will live on forever because they created something monumental. And so if we can scratch the surface of that with our stories, how cool is that?
Absolutely.
So, speaking of stories, before we air the commercial, so for those that didn't catch your first episode, what would you say was your origin story as a sci-fi nerd?
As a sci-fi nerd, so
or just speculative fiction at large.
Not what you think it is, or what you would think it was going to be. I was taking French in 9th grade, and had a really quirky, unusual professor. And one of the things he liked to do, he sort of picked out the students who were, who excelled, who were smart, who were engaged, who were doing really well, and wanted to provide, additional things to get us excited about. And so kind of met with us, what are you into, whatever. And I already kind of liked space. I mean, I was, a little bit of a space nerd. I like the space shuttle and that type of thing. So I guess I told him that. And he lent me his copy of Cosmos by Carl Sagan. Now, of course, that's not fiction. That's science. But I devoured it and was just absolutely in love. I couldn't believe it changed my world. And so then I discovered that Carl Sagan had written a science fiction book, Contact. So I went and got it, and I devoured it and absolutely loved it. And then went back to him and was like, what else can I read? And he recommended the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov. So I got that and I devoured that. And that was the end of it for me. I was a science fiction fan and a space fan also from that point on. And whenever I graduated from high school, I intended to be an astrophysicist. In fact, so it really did become my world. I wrote my high school AP English thesis on Foundation and free will versus versus determinism in the series. My teacher had no idea what I was talking about. She gave me an A. So that was how I found science fiction.
Did he make you read it in French?
No, thank goodness, no. That would have been so incredibly cruel. No.
I've forgotten all of the German I learned in college, but as one of our upper level classes, we were not allowed to speak any English in the college class, and our class assignment was reading All Quiet on the Western Front in German, on Westernacht nicht. I still remember the name in German. So, and it was cheating if we referred back to the original, because I'd read the original version. I had a kind of idea of the story because we read it in high school, and I'd read it the year before in my English lit class. But man, that was a slog. So I can't imagine how people that aren't native speakers, when we're like, I speak whatever insert language here as my primary language, but I'm reading your story in English. I'm like, hats off to you, brother or sister, because like that's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you still speak French?
Oh, very badly. I took Russian. I took a year of Russian in college. And so the main character in most of my books, Alex Solovey, her father is Russian. And so that's where that came from. I just want to take something a little different, a little more off the beaten path and that type of thing. I guess this was, after the Berlin Wall fell, after Yeltsin stood on the tank and all of that. So the Russians were our friends now. And so recently I kind of picked it back up a little bit in Duolingo. And have been trying to get at it again. I'm not, but you can't really get good at it in 10 minutes a day, I'm afraid. But French, I remember phrases and that type of thing, but not much.
I remember Disui la Jeune Vie because it was the Muzzy the Bear commercial. That was the Hooked on Phonics version of teaching you a foreign language that was on all the commercials back in the 80s and early 90s. And I know you don't watch commercials anymore, but I just remember that commercial. Yes, that's French they're speaking, and no, they're Americans. There was a skill in making a good ad that actually like got people to pay attention and remember it. That's why jingles were key, which is why the sci-fi trope of I don't know if anyone else has done it, but have you seen Demolition Man?
Yes.
With where the jingles, the commercials were actually their music because they were listening to old ads as their entertainment.
We had the best commercials in the 80s, and we know that they were the best commercials because we all still remember them. We still remember the jingles. We remember the scenes. We remember the commercials. They were memorable.
I think because they knew they had to catch. Well, I think they knew they had to get your attention partly, and then I also think we paid more attention back then. I think technology shortened our attention span. I mean, I know there are a swath of people that I only watch the TikTok shorts or the YouTube shorts, and I'm like, there's all a bunch of long form content out there that would blow your mind. Give it a shot, and it doesn't have to be our podcast. I'm just mean in general. Mm-hmm. But that, some people they live their life in those 3-minute reels at a time, and that's just I don't understand it. Kids these days. And on that note, we're gonna pause for the moment while we shamelessly shill for the man.
The Terran Empire is dead. Long live the Empire. Commander Jared Mertz, the bastard son of the Emperor, and his half-sister, Princess Kelsey, barely speak to one another. To their dismay, their father seizes an opportunity to change that and sends them on a dangerous quest to explore the fallen empire. Separated from home by an impassable gulf and struggling to redefine their relationship, they find themselves thrust into a vicious war. Unless they work together to stop the Empire's deadly legacy, billions face a horrific fate. Empire of Bones, written by Terry Mixon, now available at Amazon.com.
All right. So first off, thank you. Welcome back. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. We're still here with GS, the Great Sci-Fi Jennsen. I guess they just call you Great for short. Is that how that works? Okay.
They don't.
We'll dive into your youthful history. No. I mean, that was a missed opportunity on your peers' part to use that for you, but whatever. So thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. So first off, is this main series, because I know you haven't been writing for that long, is this series the only one you're writing in, or do you have others?
No, this is the only one, but it's really, at this point, it's more a universe than a series. So I wrote 9 books that were, a sequential plot, a trilogy of trilogies, as I put it. Each trilogy has its own self-contained overarching plot, but the characters continue and the underlying story continues through each of the 3 trilogies. But then I did go to a completely new place, new characters, new species, new location in the universe, and wrote a trilogy there. And then I brought the 2 series together and intermingled the characters as they, face a threat that neither of them can defeat alone, and that type of thing. And that was a 6-book series. So it's not all sequential. It's not a one series. It's a universe. And now I'm doing a trilogy of standalone books that involve characters that have been in the previous books, but these can totally be read first without having read the first 19. And each one of these 3 books in the trilogy is going to be that way. They're all going to be standalones, taking place in different places in the universe and that type of thing.
Okay, so do you have anywhere on your website a suggested reading order?
Absolutely, I do. Yes. And at the back of every book as well.
Okay, if you got it on your website after the show, will you drop me a link to that, and I will include that in the show notes just in case anyone's interested? Because if they can read certain ones out of order, I think some of the shorter arcs are generally, people are like, oh, I can find this. It's book 12, 13, and 14, but it's a trilogy in and of itself that I don't have to commit to the whole thing, as opposed to the first arc is 9 books. I think that might be helpful for people that want to dip their toes in the water, so to speak.
Sure. And that's where the new book comes big time also.
Yeah. So what would the age range be for, like, if you were the movie theater rating this series, like on the, G, R, PG-13, all the things, like, how would you rate this book? What's your target audience?
Well, this new book or the series as a whole? Because the answer is a little different. Okay. So for the series as a whole, I mean, they're made for adults. There's cursing for certain. There is violence. There is sex. So, whatever age of teenager, either their parent or themselves feel like they're ready for that. 16, 17, maybe 15, mature 15-year-olds, that type of thing. But they're definitely not YA. They're adult books with adult themes. It's not just about the cursing and the sex and whatever. These are complex adult themes. The new book, Medusa Falling, probably runs a little younger. There is cursing, but not as much. There is violence, but it's not as bloody. There is romance, but there's not sex on the page. So I would probably put it down, a little closer to maybe 13 or 14.
When you count because some of the audience actually, some of our audience is discerning on what level of violence and cursing and sex they want in their books as well. So when you say sex, are we talking brief mechanically this happened, or are we talking full on, 50 Shades or somewhere in between? How would you classify for that?
Yeah, it is definitely not 50 Shades. It is also not Fade to Black. It's 2 to 3 pages.
Standard romance levels?
I'm sorry?
So standard romance kind of levels?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's, so sometimes it's pretty brief. Sometimes it's more involved, but it's written romantically.
Okay.
It's sensual, not sexual kind of thing. and not
that
overly
works.
not overly graphic in terms of terminology and blow by blow or that type of thing. It's more in the seduction, and then everybody's happy.
Okay. Well, now those that are curious have your answer, and we will move on because this is a family-friendly episode, even if the books we interview about are all not always. So what would your 30-second elevator pitch first for the universe writ large be?
For the universe writ large, Amaranth is character-driven space opera of truly epic scope. It's a tale of adventure and heroism. It's chock full of evocative locations, inventive technology, and most of all, memorable characters who fight, fail, persevere, and refuse to fade away. These are stories of expansive world building and, like I said, compelling characters with interwoven storylines across multi-book arcs that really come together and pay off. And they're stories that will stick with you long after you close the page, that have meaning. And also lots of great tech and space battles and aliens, of course.
Okay. Now this is just a warning, dear listener, if you're a little bit new to the world of peopling. When they say elevator pitch, they don't actually mean in a real elevator. I tried that in an elevator at the kid's doctor's office. There was other people in the elevator. Started trying to talk to them about great sci-fi. Not you, but actual books. And they looked at me like I had two heads and like, why are you talking to me? Let me put my earbuds back in. So apparently people don't talk in elevators anymore, just in case you didn't know that. Just throwing that out there. But so the universe is large, so narrowing in our focus to Medusa Falling, whose cover is on the screen if you are watching on Rumble, BitChute, or YouTube's. What is the elevator speech for Medusa Falling? How would you sum that up for someone?
Sure. A first contact encounter is not supposed to kick off with a dead body. Our main character, Marley Morano, has been dispatched to the planet of Baleria as part of a Concord. Concord is the multi-species empire, I guess you would call it, that Amaranth is centered on. She's been dispatched to this planet as part of an initiative to meet new species and build alliances with them. But when an assassin murders her counterpart in front of her eyes and takes her hostage, she is plunged into an alien world on the brink of collapse. With no way to contact Concord or get off world, her only allies may be a shadowy band of rebels with a questionable agenda steeped in government conspiracies, mysterious genetic experiments, and bloody historical grievances that are threatening to boil over. The rightness of their cause is the least of her concerns, though, because she finds herself wanted for murder and hunted by all sides.
The one-armed man did it. So do you end up this one on a cliffhanger, or do we get resolution on at least that murder?
No, you get resolution. This is not only a standalone story, but it is a complete story on its own on the page. No cliffhangers this time, which is new for me in a lot of ways, I have to say. But I promise, yes.
So while you might be a member of the Cliffhangering Bastard Society, today was not the day.
That's correct.
Okay.
Not for the book. Nope.
So the universe is rather large, and at some point you said you sat down and you spent bazillion hours like inventing it all in your head, sketching pictures, naming things. So where did the kernel of the idea, like what is the origin story of the world? Like where did you like say, okay, this is how this all came to be?
So I was writing fan fiction for the Mass Effect video game series. That was what got me back into writing hardcore. And I did a lot of that. And somewhere along the way, once I got good at it, because I wasn't good at it at first, when I got good at it, it started to occur to me that maybe this was something I could do, for real. And so I took the fan fiction beyond the stories that had taken place in the video games and created an original story set in that universe, came up with original characters, told a whole huge arc. And it went really well, and the reception was great and everything. I was like, okay, maybe I really can do this, but I'm going to need an original story. What do I write? If anybody knows or has played any of the Mass Effect games, they're very space opera. You have a ship and the ship and the crew is the center of the story, but there are a lot of alien species. And because the ship is so important, you go to all of these different alien worlds, and you've got an alien menace that you have to defeat and that type of thing. And so that was, really, where my thinking was and my heart was and everything. So, you sit down, blank page. All right, you need an original story. What are you going to do? And I probably spent a month or two like that. Various figments of ideas coming to me and discarding them and that type of thing. And then one morning I was in the shower, which is where all great ideas come to be. And this image popped into my head, and it was of a woman. She was hanging upside down out of the bay of a spaceship that was in a hangar. And she had these virtual screens circling around her head. She had long, very dark red hair, and was in work clothes. It was obvious from the image that she was working on the ship. And I had the sense that this was her ship. And I thought, who is she? When is she in time? And why is she? And how is she going to change the world? And that's how the story started. And that is actually the first scene in Starshine, the very first book also.
Okay. So have you gone through and commissioned various art, or is the only art that exists aside for your headcanon and the covers?
I did commission character models of the two main characters. And for a long time, they appeared on the covers of my collection box sets of the trilogies. So the first three trilogies, they were on the covers of all that for a long time. They are not anymore. I have snazzy, more traditional sci-fi space opera covers now. And of course, now with Midjourney and other AI art programs, now I have art of basically all of the characters, which has been a lot of fun to do, I have to say. That's been really neat. I wouldn't have commissioned art of all of these characters. I mean, that's a huge expense. I would love to, but it would be very expensive to do just for, for me and for of course, my readers would enjoy it and that type of thing. But so it's been nice to be able to do that using Midjourney.
What was the time sink and learning curve of the Midjourney for you creating these characters?
Not too bad. Honestly, I had help. I know some people who got really good at it fast. And honestly, I asked for they did a couple of the characters and gave me the prompts that they used. And I was able to take that and then create better prompts for all of the other characters and that type of thing. So I kind of cribbed off things that other people had figured out, because it is an art to do a Midjourney art prompt.
Absolutely. One thing they teach you at the Army Infantry NCO Academy is if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So cribbing off someone else, that's top tier right there. We'll make you an honorary sergeant for that. And I meant to ask, since you were a lawyer, were you a space lawyer though? Did you specialize in space?
I wasn't, but
tell me yes, even if it's not true.
I did specialize in technology companies. That was as close as I could get.
Cool.
Yeah.
There's actually a lady that we interviewed back in season 1 who that's actually space treaties was her area of legal expertise. I'm sure her and 2 other lawyers in the world, right? But thought that was kind of cool. I'm like, I didn't even know that was a thing, but I know there are treaties involved with not colonizing certain other celestial bodies in our solar system. But I mean, we signed those when nobody could. I imagine the first time it's viable, those treaties go out the window.
Yeah, that's.
I don't imagine
that's probably gonna happen on the moon in the next couple of years. I mean, we're going, but China is also going, and that's going to be some interesting times.
I don't have a lot of faith in governments to do things. I have faith in some companies. So in one of the worlds I world built, I wrote a novel in it that the novel flopped, so we moved on. But in that world, I envisioned the first non-Earth colony was the moon because it's closer, and it wasn't great aims of science research. It was the Real Housewives of the Lunar Colony was and a reality TV company put it on. That was when I guess early 2000s when the Real Housewives shows were all the rage. Right, I don't even know if they're still on the air, but so I think I've changed covers, by the way, if you're watching or if you're listening or not watching. If you want to dive into the main arc that she mentioned, book 1, that is the cover for that. but I imagine like non like sci-fi in Star Trek world, it was all for the greater good. I suspect human nature being what it is, there's got to be some sort of profit motive. So I try to think of, okay, why else would we get to the stars? It's not really resources, because those are mostly, you can get them cheaper in an asteroid, right? You don't have to break orbit of a planet. So I try to think of other reasons, and I thought, well, reality TV works.
I like that.
Weird segue. Did you factor in entertainment in your universe? Like, do they still watch movies? Or are they watching AI generated? Like, because now, I mean, if we can do the pictures, I imagine at some point in time, AIs are going to write novels and make movies.
Oh, and that's, I mean,
I shudder to think.
That would be an entire other podcast, because that whole issue is just taking both the writing world and the art world by storm right now. But we won't go into that. Yeah, I did. I mean, they have very extensive virtual reality, as real as the real thing, effectively. And that's mentioned several times in the first couple of books. It's not a major plot point, but it's there in the background. It comes up and that type of thing. When aliens attack one of the planets and two of the characters get trapped there and are trying to get their way off, one of them observes that all of the filmmakers, of the last 200 years said, as humanity expanded out into the stars, they made all of these films, of course, about alien invasions and what we would find and all that kind of stuff. And now walking on an planet that has actually been invaded by aliens, she was like, they had no imagination about, all of those movies were crap. They had no idea what this was actually going to be like. So. And we have music. They have music, of course. Still, there's a minor character who's a musician. It's a little different. It tends to be more synth and that type of thing, but they still play instruments as well.
That's the one thing that I never understood, and I get why they do it for copyright reasons and all of that. But if in 300 years in the future, the highlight of someone's entertainment is still reading William Shakespeare, and nothing against the Bard, I love it. I read it. I've read them all. But I have to think entertainment will have progressed past that point, hopefully. So it's going to be interesting. I almost like the idea. It's going to sound janky, but like Home Alone, where they made the little TV vignettes that they showed that he played were made just for that. That's not an actual movie. Like, I almost want somebody, when they're making their world, just to make scenes from various books that haven't happened yet that people can reply or respond to as cultural touchstones. Because I mean, come on, like, everything is 80s pop or Shakespeare when they talk about like entertainment in their worlds. And you would think that they've moved past that 300 years from now. So
I think we have difficulty imagining what that's going to be, though. So we fall back to what we know.
I think it's what the reader knows, but I think there are ways you could probably get away with going around that. And then I think the other part of that is legitimately, like, they're grabbing things that are, one, not their own work, and two, because that would feel like, whatever. And then they're grabbing things in the public domain, which means it has to be old, right? I think it's 90 years after the author dies is what makes it. So I think we're up to the 1930s is public domain. I don't know. I don't know exactly how it works, because they keep changing it. Every time the mouse wants to redo it, they redo it for some reason, are laws. But anyway, one idea, you mentioned virtual reality was some in your world. I think one author that did it right, have you heard of Joe Vasicek? He writes space opera sci-fi.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So he did one where they had like some sort of jack in the back of their head, a la Matrix style, but I think he started writing. Well, no, Matrix was 99. Anyway, where they would jack into a virtual world to entertain themselves while they were traveling the stars, because there was no they traveled on space lanes. So like, it was making the long, drawn out nothingness parts so you don't go insane.
Mm-hmm.
I think who wrote Wool? That author has posited Hugh Howey. He's posited in a few of his works what space travel might do to your psyche. And I think this Joe Vasicek's answer was, well, we'll just stick them in a video game, essentially, where they can play and do whatever.
Yeah.
Do you address that when you write your own series? Do you have like, if she's doing in the beginning, doing a lot of flying around out by herself, like how is she staying sane if it's just her and her ship?
Well, in part because they have really fast FTL drives, so it doesn't take that long to get
Okay.
anywhere. So I kind of sidestep that in that respect, honestly. But then, yes, then they have the, very immersive virtual reality tools, that you can absolutely do that. I think Star Trek, everybody, loves the holodecks and loves to bash on the holodecks, but it's probably going to be not that dissimilar from that. Maybe you don't walk into a room and, the fake world encompasses you. Maybe it's still something you put on your head, on your eyes, or it's something that's built in, beneath our skin or that type of thing. But that will immerse us in a virtual world. That's going to be here soon. So it's certainly going to be here in 300 years. They're going to have that.
I think everyone that's ever been a teenager.
Go ahead.
I think anyone who's ever been a hormonal teenager knows exactly how those holodeck type devices are going to be used and abused.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Orville, the first episode of that series before they went behind a paywall, where the secondary, one of the secondary characters was in the holodeck fighting a troll in samurai armor? Like that's going to be more realistic of what people are doing with it.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So you said you sidestepped it by having them just drive really fast. Do you get into the science? Like, did you explain your FTL drive, or does it just exist?
Oh no, it's actually based on one of the leading and most plausible theories today. Warp bubble. Miguel Alcubierre is the primary person behind this, though other scientists have refined his ideas in the years since. And in fact, in the last couple of years, there have been scientists that have greatly reduced the energy requirements for this type of drive. And also, so it relies on exotic matter, which so far as we know right now doesn't exist, but there are those that are coming up with ways that we could maybe create it without using exotic matter and that type of thing. I mean, so the technology, it's not real yet, but it's plausible. And it was important for me to have my technology be plausible extensions of things that are at least theoretically possible as we understand science today. So did
you throw the word quantum in there a few times? Because you're not a real sci-fi writer, I'm told, if you don't use quantum.
Oh my goodness. I am. Yes. Yes. I use the word a bit too much, I'm afraid. And more so as we go through the series, as humanity comes to understand more about the quantum realm and ways that they can put it to use. So, yeah.
So when you do your FTL travel, because we're looking at the pictures of your spaceships on the covers, do you have them sort of just be, it's like we're traveling, you see everything going really, really fast, but that's about the extent of it, all of Star Trek? Do you take some of the universes where you're almost in an alternate dimension when you're FTL travel, and then you hop out, almost like a wormhole to a different place to cut space time? Like, do you delve into all of that when you're writing in this world?
I reference the fact that basically the stars blur away outside. It's not unlike what you see in Star Wars. You zoom in and the stars go whoosh. It's not quite that. Like I said, it's more of a blurring effect, but because you literally are creating a bubble around the ship that warps space around it. So no, whenever you're doing it, you can't see out to the stars and the nebula and the planets and all of that.
So the one thing that Star Trek always got me with is the idea of some people, there are windows in space on your spaceships, versus is it just a projection screen?
Right.
I've heard both arguments. They did both in Star Trek and the various whatever. So what are your thoughts on windows on your spaceship?
I started out with windows on the spaceships. If I could go back, I'm not sure I would do it that way. I would probably go projections from the beginning. And I moved towards projections in particular because late one of the alien enemies that they are fighting has ways that they're basically shape-shifting metal, and so they can get in ships. And so the good guys have to create basically ships that have no seams. And so that becomes, a big plot point, actually. And so, if you're not going to have seams, you really can't have windows either. And so they're using projections at that point. And I think that is probably the way that you actually go. It's a weakness anywhere that you're putting two different kinds of material up against each other, as you would from the metal of the hull and the glass from the for the viewports. So I think they would probably do away with those.
I think I think Star Trek, wasn't it like clear metal that they were going through? It wasn't actual glass, but yeah. So how did you solve the no seams thing? Because I'm just trying to, you can't build a spaceship in one piece, and if it's not one solid piece, you've got joints, seams, whatever. So just having grown up around ships, right? Like actual naval ships. I worked in the shipyard partly to pay for my college degree. How did you address that? Because it's boggling my mind right now.
Yeah. Well, they had invented a metal that it's not shape-shifting. It's not like the aliens that was sentient, shape-shifting metal, but it, well, for one thing, it could repair itself. And so it was very flexible and malleable and conducive to electrical signals and that type of thing. So you end up with fibers running through the metal whenever the ship is built. And it could send signals that would cause the metal to melt, it seems, and reform as a solid form. And later, when they needed the seams again, like for a door to open, could signal it to break apart and recreate the seam.
Okay. I mean, I guess if it can heal itself, then much like when bones break and they heal back stronger, your joints then become strong points in your skeleton, but that's still a seam if the thing can go through it. So, okay, I'll buy it. That sounds interesting. So, what can you tell us about the aliens that for this First Contact story, without spoilers, obviously?
Sure. So that's the concept so Cosmic Shores is the name of the trilogy of standalone books that I'm doing here, and the overarching concept for them is you take one of the characters from the universe and you put them outside of Concord's safe borders and that fallback position and everything. You put them out there, cut off from all of their resources, and they have to survive, get back home, all of that type of stuff. So in this case, Marley ends up on an alien world. She's taken hostage. They are able to prevent her from contacting home or any of that. And so she is stuck there. And so this is really a true First Contact alien immersion story. So much of the book is about these aliens and their world as she learns about it. We see it through her eyes as she at first doesn't know much at all and gradually begins to understand the world, the culture, its history, and these terrible troubles and problems that they are having. And the crisis that the planet finds themselves in. So the aliens are called Bellascosians. They are humanoid. They have, they call it lamellar skin. They don't have scales exactly, but their skin is textured and it almost looks like it has scales, somewhat iridescent. They have a tail that is very dexterous, almost as good as having a third hand and that type of thing. And one of the interesting things about them is amongst family or people they choose to designate as family, they are able to sense one another's emotions, sentiments, and really even thoughts. And so that has created a culture in which families are, well, they're the center of the culture. They're very, very important to the Bellascosians. And so they live in these huge family pods, basically their aunts and uncles and cousins and third cousins removes and all of that all kind of grow up together. And amongst them, like I said, nothing is hidden. They are extremely close due to this almost telepathic connection that they have. Part of the premise, the conflict in the story is due to some genetic experiments 20 or so years ago. some small portion of the Bella Scotians developed the ability to extend this telepathy outside their families to everyone. And so suddenly you have these mind readers, and it is completely disrupting their society. And the government is trying to hide it and put them down, and they imprison them and spread lies about them and all that type of thing. And then you've got groups that are fighting against that, trying to expose the truth and that type of thing. They are technologically advanced. Probably I'd put them about 50 years ahead of where we are in our own reality. They've got, a couple of lunar bases, colonies that people live on, and they've got little colonies orbiting their gas giants and that type of thing. They go to space a lot. They don't have FTL drives. They haven't discovered that, or artificial gravity, or that type of thing. So from Concord's perspective, they're still pretty primitive, but they are now a spacefaring species, at least. They are making the strides that we will hopefully be making soon.
Okay. So when you write this, taking yourself out of the author space and thinking just as the average person, when you wrote about the telepathic society, because they did that in Star Trek too, and she's the most annoying creature in the entire franchise, Diana Troy. But did the whole concept of the telepathic connection and the lack of privacy and all that freak you out a little bit when you were conceptualizing it?
Yeah. And it's a point that's made in the book a couple of times. Marley, and obviously talking about her culture versus their culture with the characters that she meets, she's like, humans are very individualistic, and our privacy is one of the most important things, to us. We're basically the polar opposite of what you're doing. And of course they struggle to understand that, because this is everything that they know. And they view her as, she must be a very lonely, solitary, creature to live so alone, only in her own head. And she's like, no, it's not like that at all. We value it. That's how I want it to be. And there are some other character reasons why this really worked for her in particular. But I'll need to go into that, but that is part of the story as well. So yeah, I think we as humans are naturally afraid of that type of thing. The notion that someone else could know what we were thinking, all the time, even when we didn't want them to, that there'd be no way to shut that type of thing out. Yeah, I think that's kind of terrifying for us.
Yeah, I don't know. Having lived in communal environments in the Army, like the privacy is something I value greatly now that I can. So the idea of having people in my head, I'm like, I don't know if you want to go in there. You might not like what you find. No. So how clear is their telepathic skill? Is it just feelings and emotions and general sense of well-being, or down to like, oh, he's remembering that?
The closer the relationship between the characters, the stronger it is. So two of the main characters are twin siblings, and they can read each other's thoughts straight on. There is nothing hidden from them. When you get out to people, cousins, and people who aren't actually blood relation, but have been sort of adopted into the family, which is the thing that they do, then it's really more sentiments and emotions, more so than I am sending you, this is the direct thought that I am sending to you, and it's a paragraph of, exactly what I want to say.
Do you have a delineation in your head when you're creating these links where the line between telepathic and empathic merge and meld from one into the other?
I think that's a good question, because in a lot of ways, Marley sees it as empathy more than telepathy, because obviously, so they can't read her mind because she's not Bella Scotian. There's just none of the biology to do it. But one of the characters that has had this genetic mutation, which has really strengthened this telepathic ability so much, is able to read her, at least vaguely, her sentiments and emotions. And so from Marley's perspective, it looks like she's an empath rather than a telepath. And that's really how that relationship is.
Okay. So you've mentioned that you're world building a little bit on the OCD level of extra. We'll just call it extra when you were
Yeah.
first started writing. So how did you go about creating these fantastical alien creatures and places? Did you create it all out of whole cloth? Did you let Mother Nature inspire you? Did you pull out the D&D, monster manual?
You
Have
stole
some.
my answer. My pithy
Okay,
answer to
go
the
on.
question is always D&D monster manuals. Uh, and I act
Did you
because
roll dice to get the page number?
no, I have a 4-volume series, and it's not actually D&D. It is, but it is Space Aliens. But it is very much modeled on the D&D model of monster manuals. And I have certainly flipped through that and gotten lots of ideas. I've never taken one whole cloth. Oh, I'm going to make this alien. I'll take different characteristics from different ones. But yeah, I'm not ashamed to say that I have done that. Obviously, video games as well. There have been so many aliens imagined in video games and our movies and everything. I've been consuming science fiction media I won't say how long, for a very, very long time. And I've just sort of absorbed it all. So it's all in my head, getting mixed and matched all the time.
Okay. So when you describe your aliens, Star Trek was famous for their forehead ridge of the week because budgets were a thing, technology back then was a thing. When you do science fiction in the print or the visual medium, you have a lot more options because you don't have to hire an actor that's only 3 foot tall and has an extra arm, because as far as I know, those don't exist. So how do you go about designing the aesthetics? Do you keep them all sort of vaguely humanoid, or are you all over the place?
Some of both. So a theory that the characters have in the books is that sort of humanoidish, arms, legs, a torso with a head on top, eyes and ears of some kind is nature's preferred configuration, and the nature returns to it again and again. And so most of the aliens are humanoid-ish. But even that leaves a lot of variety. We've got Cocteau, which are large, well, almost lion-ish aliens, except they walk on 2 legs, and they have these really strong, thick tails. They have 4 eyes and these long snouts with all these teeth. They look very terrifying. They're not. I mean, they are an aggressive, warlike species, but they're not that terrifying. But so that's humanoid, but that's a long way from humans. But then, so yeah, I would say probably half to 2/3 of my species fall in that basic rubric of arms, legs, torso, head type of thing. But not all of them. We have ethereal aliens that are wispy and can fly, run around all around the universe. We've got a sort of dolphin analog, as a cross between a dolphin and a manta ray, who are sentient. We've got sort of tree people. And of course, then we have the metal shapeshifters, which are very different. Sentient planet, obviously. I've got 2 flying species. One, which a falcon is probably the closest. So we're kind of talking birds, but they're not quite falcons either. And then a taller, what was did you ever see the movie Mimic? About 20 or 30 years ago. It was a horror movie, but it had these creatures that were like moths, but they were human sized. And so these aliens are kind of like that. They fly, they have wings, but they also have arms and legs, and they are human sized and have very bird-like facial characteristics and that type of thing. We've got blobs. There are some iridescent blobs that break apart and come back together and that type of thing. And they're one of the more unusual and unknowable species. They are sentient and they take place in Concord, but nobody's ever really been able to figure out exactly what their deal is. So yeah, I'm very cognizant of the Star Trek pointy ears phenomenon. And I've tried very hard not to have, all my aliens just be humans with pointy ears or ridges on their forehead. So I've tried to do a lot of
strange dots on their face.
Exactly, yes. So I tried to do a lot of different things, but within the humanoid framework, and then also have some that are well outside of it.
Did you buy into the requirement for advanced tech as opposable thumbs, so that way you can do the manipulation of things to build?
A
Because
little
obviously,
bit.
if you're building an alien species, at some point in time, they didn't start off, where we are today with all the technology. They had to build up to it on their version, like we did through evolution, etc. And so the premise is you would need opposable digits to be able to do the grip, to do the fine manipulation. I've seen some authors get around it, but like, well, they can control metal by building it with their, like, moving it with their mind, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I still think at some point you still need hands to grip to do a
Yes,
lot of things.
it's a logical thing, and so that's why, so like the Falcon type aliens. One way in which they are different is their claws are a little closer to hands. They have opposable thumbs. They have enough of the ability to grip that they can manipulate objects and that type of thing. And in fact, in Medusa Falling, that comes up because Marley, as she's learning about the Bellascotian technology and trying to understand it so she can use it and that type of thing. That if you have a humanoid form and if you have finger digits and that type of thing, then that leads everybody along similar lines of technological development. They build the same things. Their society develops in similar ways, because that just leads to a natural way of interacting with our environment.
Okay. So we don't really have the formula anymore, people. We're doing a little bit more free flowing, other than the religion question, because that's just us. But we do like, to keep it on track. So we'd like you to weigh in. We recorded this way in advance so we could launch this on her sale date, because as you're listening to this, the Medusa Falling is on sale for how much?
99 cents.
So it's a steal of a deal. You'd be stupid to pass it up. How long is the novel?
It is 87,000 words, which is the shortest book I have ever written by several thousand. My books, most of my books, not all of them, but most of them are big. They're meaty. And that was something else that I'm doing deliberately here. I wanted to do a couple of books that are shorter, they're tight, they're fast paced, they're fun, they're adventurous. They're, like I said, an easy, fun read.
So that's what, for you Kindle readers and paperback readers, that's 175 pages ish. And the ish is doing a lot of heavy lifting, as I like to say. But it's roughly 500 words a page. So that's actually not too bad for a novel. That used to be long, even, in the pulp era, until Sanderson and George R. R. Martin and J.R.R. Tolkien, they decided they had to write kill you if it landed on your foot kind of books, and everyone else thought they had to follow suit. I actually don't mind that. That feels like a good pace to me. Long enough to make an audiobook worth it if there is one, but not so long you have to, give up 3 weeks of your life to listen to it.
Right.
So, is this available in audiobook, or right now just ebook and print?
The audiobook will probably not be available when this airs. That will probably be September. But it absolutely will be an audiobook. Yes, I have an incredible narrator. She has narrated all of my books. I don't know what I will do if she ever fires me. She is amazing. And so, yeah, I would expect that to be ready in September. But It will be. It is an ebook. Yeah, I'm sorry. No, it's an ebook. It's on all the retailers. It's not just on Amazon. And it is also available in paperback and hardback.
So if you buy the ebook on the sale, which is going to be from August 14th, I think you said, to the 25th?
Yeah, 14th through the 25th, yes.
If you buy it at the 99 cents, and then when the audiobook comes back and launch, you will still be able to do the Kindle pairing. You will still be able to buy the audiobook. If you go through the Amazon, not Audible, you will still be able to get the reduced price to pair them together. So that's a thing. And it should work for you. If not, Amazon customer service is pretty good about working with you if you're having problems. So yeah, that's a thing. I mentioned that we're recording this in advance because this is the first interview where we've actually talked to an author about the books, where we just threw the script out and we just had a free flowing conversation. So feel free to throw some criticism my way if you thought, it was herky jerky and all over the place. I mean, that's how my brain works without a script. That's TBI brain for you people. It's a dark and dreary place in here. But yeah, any criticisms you have or critiques, we're all for it. So shoot us a message. Join us on the Facebook page, comment there, comment on BitChute, Rumble, YouTube, podcast platform, all the places we are, you can talk to us, and we will let you do that. With that being said, where do you see this Amaranth universe ending? Right now, this is the 20th book in the world you've written. What's next?
Yeah. So I just finished a huge 6-book plot arc series called Riven Worlds. And that was some big, heavy stuff. That was not the end, though. So now I'm doing this trilogy of standalone fun adventure novels. And then I am going to do a couple of prequel short stories, novelette type length. It may actually end up all being in one book, a sort of collected stories of the history of Amaranth kind of thing. And then I have another big trilogy planned, which is sort of foreshadowed at the end of Riven Worlds. Basically, there was one more threat out there, one more threat on the horizon that they know about. They know it's coming. They don't know when it's coming or what it's going to be like. And so all of my readers are expecting, they've been expecting for a while, when are these guys going to show up? We know they're going to show up. So they're going to show up. And so that'll be a return to the big epic space opera, multiple points of view, interwoven storylines type of thing. And that will be a trilogy. And that will have a big bang up conclusion. And that, so, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26 books. That will conclude the sort of most overarching meta story arc that I've always had in mind for this universe. That will bring an end to that. That is not the same as saying that it's the end for the characters, or given what we talked about early on, I don't think anybody thinks that I'm going to kill everybody at the end. That's just not my style. So it's not the end for the characters or the universe or that type of thing. But after that, I may truly go off and write some completely new things, new characters outside of Amaranth, totally new thing. Probably will then eventually come back here as well and write new stories involving some of these characters and that type of thing. But really, everything is open for me after the end of that trilogy.
Okay. If you were writing a new world and you were starting today, we'll say, you blinked, you slapped, you dictated the hell out of it, and all of those books were written, 6 more books overnight, and you were starting this new universe. Are you going to go as crazy on the world building, or are you going to take it as you come?
I've learned a lot, obviously, in writing 20 books. And so I know I will probably not give names to 100 planets next time, and place them on the map. I had a NASA map of the Milky Way, and I put every one of those 100 colonies on the map. And that mattered for how long it took people to get places and that type of thing. So probably not that much. I am a total plotter, but a little pantsing has gotten in as I've gotten more experience with this. So, but at the same time, starting an entirely new world where I have to make up everything from scratch. Yeah, I'm going to do a lot of world building. I'm going to need to know why this technology developed this way, and where it all is, what they have, what they don't, what the history of the world is, what events led to the situation of the society whenever we meet it, and all of that. Yeah.
When I first wrote my first series, now keep in mind I write, at least until lately, I've wrote almost exclusively military science fiction. And so they had this military unit. I had the entire battalion with a name for each character, what their position was in the unit, what they carried, because there is some formula involved in the organization structure. As individual characters died, because I said, we wiped out this squad, or I just know 3 people died, and he didn't have to know their name, the main character, Lance Scipio, but I did. And so I would deceased at, and then I would redo the from this point forward, I would redo the TO&E, the table of organization and equipment, and then I would promote people. So there was a whole career progression. This guy started as a PFC, and he didn't even get promoted until Bob died. And everyone was like, I don't know who the hell Bob was. You never wrote about Bob, Right. So you could definitely, and I thought about how many wasted man hours I spent just looking at name generators, and I'm like, yeah, you could overdo it, but it was fun in the beginning to do that kind of stuff, just to make it real.
And you're right. You need to know, even if the reader doesn't need to know.
But yeah, I think at this point I have the same organization because militaries are organized in formula that exists for a reason. Once you figure out the formula, all I need to know is to slot in a name as I actually name somebody, but they stay John Doe until they need a name. So I think I'd probably do that with planets if I was you too. So how do you come up with names for planets? What was your formula? Did you have one?
I went a lot of different places. I used Latin and Greek a lot. I used history, place locations from back in the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, all of that. I used our planet because obviously, I mean, you see this in sci-fi shows all the time. They go out there and they settle a planet and they call it New York, or New Montana, and that's going to happen. So I looked
And there'll
at
be like 100 of them.
right, even newer New York, and that type of thing. But I tried to spread it around. So a couple of planets that were settled by the Chinese and the Japanese, and so I looked at their history and tried to find important historical figures or locations or that type of thing. What would they name a planet that they settled, and that type of thing. So it really put, some of them are pulled from religious text, under the theory that planets would be settled by a lot of different people and cultures and nations. So they are really all over the place that way.
Okay. But did you go full Expanse and get Space Mormons? Because I think that's like a requirement to have.
I don't have Space Mormons, but I do have Space Hippies.
Nice. I think the
first planet that the first aliens invade is a planet that has been settled by space hippies. And it is a little bit they are a little bit caricaturish. A character is doing yoga while levitating above the palm fronds, because the planet has this effect. Magnetic is naturally magnetic, and so they can levitate a little bit and all that. And they are total space hippies. And a lot of readers made some funny jokes about that. That the first thing I did was I killed all the space hippies.
I mean, I get it. I like that though. That's good. I think the closest I came is I had the Amish in space, which, because if you know that they don't like technology, was part of why it was in my farcical sci-fi, but space comedy is just too hard to write. Apparently my humor is better suited for a gutter than for fine dining establishments. So it was an acquired taste and I was one and out when it comes to space comedy. But yeah, I always thought that was funny, like how you mesh real cultures into your science fiction without being a caricature or offensive in a way that doesn't serve the plot. So I thought that was kind of interesting. All right, well, we've been rambling for an hour and a half, and as much as I'm having fun with this new format, I have to have some benchmark to shut myself up. So I do watch the clock, people. But before we let you go, Miss Great Sci-Fi Jennsen, can you tell listeners and viewers how they can find you on the wild interwebs? And we'll link that all in the show notes.
It is so easy. My website is gsjennsen.com, and I am GS Jennsen everywhere. Facebook and Twitter are where I am most active on social media, and I am GS Jennsen on both of them. But I am also on Instagram and Pinterest and Tumblr, and now I am also on Mastodon and Threads. So if you are chasing the next social media platform, I'm there too. It's GS Jennsen everywhere.
You are way ahead of the curve. So you can find us, a dear listener, on our link tree, which will be linked to the show notes, which is linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast, where YouTube does not like us to link to BitChute and Rumble. But after 5 years of podcasting, I decided, maybe YouTube is not the only place I should put my videos. So we did this great sync of the channel. So now all 279 episodes are over on Rumble. BitChute only got the newest ones, and we're not at a place where we're backed enough to pay for the extra storage for our long form back catalog. But so follow us on the link tree. You can get to our Rumble or our BitChute. We are over on Twitter at twitter.com/SF_fantasy_show, Sierra Foxtrot _fantasy_show. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. I swear I answer that thing at least once a week. I promise. So if you want to reach out, that is a viable option. We have a Facebook group where all the shenanigans happen over at facebook.com/groups/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, /groups/Blasters and Blades Podcast. We do have a Facebook page. Once Cisca gets done doing her Dragon Con pre-convention stuff, because we're recording this in July, and this is the big push for all of the directors to do their thing. She takes every July off. So no, she wasn't fired for everyone sending me the letters. She had to take time to do the thing that, she obligated herself to. So she's still involved in the Facebook group. So if you want to talk to her, sometimes she even answers us when she's allowed to sleep. I understand the Dragon Con overlords. They're like cracking the whip and like, you got to turn in stuff, and I don't know what that's all about. It seems a little excessive to me.
I need my schedule for Dragon Con. So if I could crack the whip on them, I would. So.
Yeah, I get it. So, but anyway, so that's where she's been. She'll be back. We're actually doing, well, you would have heard it already, but we haven't recorded it as of yet. And she will be back for our episode where we're talking about dragons, because, she has an affinity for, I still think wolves are cooler than dragons, but that's just me. Ooh, does your world have dragons in it?
Yes, actually it does.
Nice. I dig it. All right. That's cool points for you.
Planet dragons, yes.
I like it. Are they sentient or are they?
They're not fully sentient. They're smart but okay. They are beasts. And Marley is actually a huge fan of the dragons. And by the time Medusa falling happens, she has befriended one of them. She is closer to the dragons than most characters in the books are. So there you go. One more reason to read it.
Does she ride them?
Literally, that happens in book 19. But yes.
Does she call the planet Pern?
No.
Because you didn't want to get sued. I get it.
Yeah. There's homage, and then there's So.
At least you could defend yourself. That's a lot better than most authors would get, although they do say that's a fool for a client at that point. But all right. You can also find us on our website at anchor.fm/blasters and blades. Again, anchor.fm/blasters -and blades. Whereas for as little as 99 cents a month, you can help keep the lights on. When we can get enough reoccurring pledges, we will back the BitChute in the way they require to get the larger uploads, so we can start adding our back catalog over there. But in the meantime, we did sync it to the YouTube. So all of you BitChute users, you get the newer episodes. But until then, we got to episode 4, and episode 5 was too big of a file. Doc Spears likes to talk. Not that I'm complaining. If you want to support the show more directly, you can support us over at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section this for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts, Doc Cisca and Nick Garber, duly caffeinated. They will drink until the gold stuff comes out of their eyeballs, because coffee is liquid gold, people. Liquid gold.
Yep.
All right. How do you take your coffee before we bring this home?
Black.
Ooh, my dad always said when I grew up I'd drink it black, but for now it's French vanilla creamer. That's the way to go. All right. Thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Nick Garber and Doc Cisca, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge along nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Thank you for sticking with us, and thank you for coming back on. Jennsen, it was a great interview. Thank you.
Absolutely. I appreciate it very much. Had a lot of fun.